There are haunted places, legendary places, even cursed places. But Skinwalker Ranch isn't any of those things. It's something stranger, something that feels like a mistake in the landscape. A place where the edges of the world are a little too thin, and something on the other side is pressing through. Tucked deep in the Uintah Basin of northeastern Utah, far beyond the Wasatch Front and long stretches of empty two-lane roads, sits a fenced-in patch of desert where nothing behaves the way it's supposed to. Lights stalk ranchers. Animals vanish without tracks. Cattle die under surgical conditions no human could replicate. Strange creatures appear, leave prints for a few yards, and then stop mid-stride as if they stepped into somewhere else entirely. And when investigators think they've learned something, the ranch changes tactics. This place has terrified families, fascinated billionaires, attracted government black budgets, and pushed scientists into theories they once laughed at. What happens at Skinwalker Ranch doesn't fit into a single category. It overlaps, it stacks, it interacts. And the deeper you go, the more honest investigators admit the same unsettling truth. Whatever is out there is intelligent, aware, and not particularly interested in whether people believe in it. This is Skinwalker Ranch, Utah's paranormal epicenter, and no matter how you approach it, the land pushes back. Long before you even reach the ranch, the Uintah Basin gives off a feeling that doesn't exist anywhere else in the state. Coming from Sandy or anywhere along the Wasatch Front, you get used to the noise of the valley, the traffic, the hum of the city, the mountains that raise like walls on both sides. But the moment you drive east, something shifts. The noise fades, the distances widen. The air feels open in a way that almost feels intrusive, like the landscape is paying too much attention to you. People who live out near Roosevelt or Fort Duchesne will tell you the basin has always been strange. Even tribes who lived here long before modern settlement treated parts of the land with caution. The Ute people believed the region carried a kind of spiritual weight. Not a Hollywood version of curses and monsters, but real warnings passed down through generations. Certain paths, certain ridges, and certain stretches of desert were avoided except by medicine men. These weren't areas of superstition. They were areas considered dangerous, places where something else moved. And here's the part that gets overlooked. Skinwalker Ranch is not the only hotspot. The entire basin has a long history of bizarre lights, humanoid shadows, strange noises, and creatures that don't match any known wildlife. The ranch is simply where the activity is the strongest, like the eye of the storm. Residents miles away have reported blue orbs floating silently above their property. Hunters talk about hearing footsteps behind them in places where no tracks appear. Drivers on empty county roads describe figures standing near the fence lines long after midnight. Even people who don't believe in the paranormal will admit the basin can feel off in a way that's hard to describe. You can feel watched without ever seeing a thing. And once you enter the ranch's boundaries, that quiet pressure intensifies. Animals behave differently. Electronics glitch. People get migraines, nausea, or vertigo. The land itself feels like it has a pulse. Skinwalker Ranch isn't an isolated anomaly. It's the center point of a region that's been strange for centuries, a place where folklore, geology, and something older all intersect. And I lived out in Utah for a little while, and I'm going to tell you, it is pretty weird. It is pretty weird. I actually lived in Sandy, that's why that's in there. But yeah, it gets weird like in the mountains. It gets weird. It gets weird in some of the spaces that I've been in. It gets weird. There's weird stuff out in Utah. So just know that. Aside from the weird stuff and the weird feelings, sometimes the people are freaking weird. So I'm just saying, no shade. Maybe a little bit. Comment below. Most UFO hotspots revolve around nighttime lights or rare sightings. At Skinwalker Ranch, the sky behaves like it's alive. The Sherman family, the ranch's owners before the modern era, saw blue, orange, and white orbs so often that it became part of their daily routine. These weren't distant glimmers. They hovered over fields, floated between trees, and sometimes approached close enough that the Shermans could feel the hair on their arms stand up. The lights weren't random. They moved with purpose, zigzagging through the ranch before shooting upward with incredible speed. Daytime sightings were even stranger. Metallic craft appeared over the property, disc-shaped, box-shaped, and sometimes too fast to identify. Ranch hands saw objects shoot across the sky and vanish behind hills in a blink. Investigators later recorded bright reflective objects appearing and disappearing in the clouds as if they were phasing in and out. One of the most disturbing events happened when researchers captured a shimmering, circular distortion on thermal imagery. It looked like a floating heat mirage, except it wasn't near the ground. As they watched, the circle grew darker, like a hole opening in midair. On the other side was complete blackness, no sky, no clouds, no familiar color gradients, just void. Then within seconds, it sealed shut. Some believe the UFOs are advanced craft. Others think they're probes, drones, or something not entirely physical. But the most unsettling theory is that these objects don't come from the sky, they travel through it. The patterns suggest that the ranch may be sitting beneath some kind of aerial corridor, not a runway, not a flight path, a crossing point. And every time researchers try to pin down behaviors or repeat observations, the phenomenon changes. It adapts, it pivots, it reacts. At Skinwalker Ranch, the question isn't whether something is in the sky. The question is how many different types of something are up there and where they're coming from. And there's a show you should watch it's about Skinwalker Ranch and this realtor that owns it and everything. And there's this guy, he calls himself Dragon. The creature sightings at Skinwalker Ranch don't match any known wildlife patterns. They don't even stay consistent. The first Sherman encounter remains one of the most famous. A massive wolf-like creature walked calmly towards the family in broad daylight. It wasn't aggressive, it wasn't afraid, it acted like it belonged there. Its head reached the chest of an adult man. When it clamped down on a calf, the family fired multiple shots at point-blank range. The bullets didn't slow it, didn't wound it, didn't even make the animal flinch. Moments later, it trotted away and disappeared, and its tracks suddenly stopped in the mud, mid-stride, as if the creature stepped into thin air. That was just the beginning. Ranchers across the basin have reported tall, dark humanoid figures that move unnaturally fast. Others have seen large dog-like shapes watching from the ridgelines, only for the creatures to vanish when approached. Some sightings match descriptions from native lore, beings capable of shifting shape, blending into shadows, or mimicking human sounds. But not all creatures resemble animals. Investigators captured footage of a transparent, predator-style distortion running across a field before scaling a ridge and disappearing into the rocks. On thermal cameras, it looked like a hole in the environment shaped vaguely like a body. The Ute Tribe has always warned that the region includes areas inhabited by malevolent shapeshifters, what non-tribal communities now call skinwalkers. These aren't monsters in the Hollywood sense, but people who performed dark ceremonies to transform into something beyond human, something capable of moving between forms. Whether these creatures are spiritual, interdimensional, cryptid, or something science can't categorize yet, they share one trait: intelligence. They behave as if they're observing, testing, or interacting with the environment and the people inside it. And unlike UFO sightings, these encounters often feel personal, like whatever is out there chooses when to be seen, and by whom. If the skies and the fields weren't enough, the ranch house itself became hostile. The Sherman family described living in a place that acted like it had a mind of its own. Items vanished from the kitchen only to appear later in impossible locations. Groceries removed from bags were found repacked as if someone was reversing the family's actions. Tools disappeared from barns and storage rooms, then reappeared miles away or perched atop tall trees. Heavy machinery moved on its own or twisted into unusable shapes. When investigators replaced the Sherman family, the activity didn't stop. In fact, it grew more aggressive. Batteries drained instantly. High-end electronics malfunctioned in patterns that suggested interference rather than coincidence. Doors unlocked by themselves. Shadows crossed hallways when no one else was inside. The most disturbing element was the voices. Researchers heard muffled conversations from behind walls, outside windows, and under floorboards. Not echoes, not sounds carried by the wind, but distinct voices speaking in low, conversational tones. When investigators tried to get closer, the voices faded or shifted locations. One researcher dismissed the phenomenon publicly, claiming nothing on the ranch could physically harm him. Days later, an invisible force struck him hard across the head, leaving visible injuries and intense swelling. Medical tests couldn't determine the cause. The ranch house wasn't passively haunted. It responded. It pushed back. And it seemed to escalate when challenged. Unlike typical poltergeist locations, the ranch didn't rely on fear or emotional states. It behaved more like a testing ground, an environment where something unseen manipulates the physical world, not randomly but deliberately. At Skinwalker Ranch, the walls don't just have eyes, sometimes they move. Cattle mutilations are part of UFO lore worldwide, but Skinwalker Ranch has produced some of the most precise and unexplained cases ever recorded. Ranchers found perfectly healthy animals dead with internal organs removed through small, circular incisions that looked like they were made with advanced surgical tools. There was no blood, not on the ground, not on the animal, not even within the body cavity. Predators don't do that. Tools don't do that. And the ranch experienced many of these mutilations in broad daylight. In one case, a cow died within minutes of being left alone. A ranch hand had eyes on the animal from across the field and saw nothing approach it. No struggle, sounds, or movement. But when he walked over minutes later, the cow was dead and partially dissected. Radiation spikes were detected near multiple carcasses. Some animals showed signs of precise tissue removal that even veterinarians and forensic experts struggled to explain. The cuts weren't jagged, they weren't torn, they were clean, circular, and almost mechanical. Tracks around the animals were non-existent. No prints, no tire marks, no drag marks. It was as if the animal had been harvested and placed back in the same position. A few researchers suggested the mutilations might be part of a biological survey, not an attack, not a feeding, but a collection process. Something studying genetics, tissue integrity, or environmental contamination. Whatever the cause, the mutilations weren't random acts of violence. They were clean, consistent, and repeatable. The work of something operating with precision and complete indifference to being detected. Here's where Skinwalker Ranch crosses from folklore into national interest. The U.S. government became deeply involved. Robert Bigelow purchased the ranch in the mid-1990s and formed NIDS, a research group dedicated to documenting the phenomena with scientific rigor. They observed so many anomalies: structured craft, invisible entities, electromagnetic bursts, radiation spikes, and creature sightings, that the Pentagon took notice. Soon after, the government launched AAWSAP, a classified program aimed at understanding advanced aerospace threats, but behind the official language was something more direct. They were studying Skinwalker Ranch. Their investigation wasn't debunking, it was documentation, and much of what they found remains classified. Researchers recorded microwave pulses capable of causing burns and neurological symptoms. Entire teams experienced nausea, dizziness, and hearing disruptions after entering specific hot zones. Some investigators suffered long-term medical issues, including severe scalp swelling caused by exposure to invisible forces on the property. The government doesn't funnel millions of dollars into studying folklore. They study data. And the data coming from Skinwalker Ranch was too consistent, too measurable, and too technologically advanced to ignore. The most unsettling part? Government interest didn't fade with time. It increased. New owners continued documenting anomalies. Private aerospace contractors installed cutting-edge surveillance equipment. And each new wave of technology detected phenomena that didn't match anything in the known natural or mechanical world. Skinwalker Ranch wasn't treated like a haunted house, it was treated like a potential threat. And the secrecy surrounding the research suggests that the government learned more than the public realizes, and far more than they're willing to share. So why is the Uintah Basin so paranormally dense? The Uintah Basin's geology is a patchwork of ancient seabed, volcanic residue, mineral-rich sandstone, and intersecting fault lines. This combination creates natural electromagnetic anomalies, magnetic drift zones, and subsurface energy pockets that can interfere with electronics and produce measurable field spikes. Some researchers believe the geological conditions function like natural batteries, charging and releasing energy in patterns that could influence both physical equipment and human perception. If the land itself acts as a conductor or amplifier, then phenomena that rely on electromagnetic signatures may be drawn to the region or strengthened by it. Forbidden zones. The Ute Tribe's warnings about this area didn't originate from modern paranormal interest. Their oral history designates certain regions, including the land around the ranch, as spiritually dangerous. These were places where shapeshifters, dark entities, or corrupted humans were believed to roam. Only medicine men entered these zones, and even they proceeded with caution. While Western investigators debated whether stories of skinwalkers were literal or symbolic, the alignment between tribal warnings and modern hotspots suggests the basin carried a reputation for danger long before the ranch earned its name. Researchers have documented distortions in the air above the ranch. Spherical warping, mirage-like ripples, and sudden drops in environmental readings. Thermal cameras captured openings that appeared as circular voids, darker than the sky, as if exposing a space that didn't match the surrounding environment. These anomalies are too localized and too structured to be natural. They suggest the region may act as a thin place where boundaries between our world and another are closer, causing random or intentional crossings. This theory explains why creature sightings, UFOs, and poltergeist activity overlap. They may be symptoms of the same phenomenon manifesting in different forms. Government involvement is often the strongest indicator that a phenomenon is more than folklore. AAWSAP researchers documented radiation levels, electromagnetic pulses, and craft exhibiting non-ballistic motion. These readings aren't cultural legends, they're technological signatures. The secrecy surrounding much of the data implies the government believes the basin contains something advanced, something capable of interacting with physical space in ways we don't yet understand or control. When sightings are mapped, they cluster around Bottle Hollow Reservoir, ridge lines, and natural waterways. Water often acts as a conductor, and its mineral content can amplify geological energy fields. Orbs have been seen diving into the reservoir without splashing. Creatures appear along ridges before vanishing. Electromagnetic readings intensify near natural water sources. This suggests the land's geography funnels phenomena towards specific hot zones, concentrating activity instead of dispersing it. Taken together, these layers reveal the basin as a convergence zone. Not a haunting, not a UFO runway, and not a cursed land, but a pressure point where geology, history, physics, and something unexplained overlap. Skinwalker Ranch sits on the bullseye of a map that's been strange long before modern attention. Strip away the hype, the meme status, the TV shows, and the rumors, and you're left with something impossible to ignore. Skinwalker Ranch is a location where reality bends. Not symbolically, not metaphorically, literally. Skeptics walk into the ranch expecting tricks and walk off with migraines, missing time, or the unsettling realization that they can't explain what they just saw. Scientists bring calibrated equipment and end up documenting anomalies that violate their training. Even seasoned investigators admit the ranch isn't simply active, it's interactive. What makes Skinwalker Ranch uniquely unnerving is that the phenomena don't stay confined. They follow people home. They appear miles away. They show up on equipment before they show up to the naked eye. The ranch feels like a living system, aware, observant, and responsive. And here's the truth most people miss. You don't need to believe in the paranormal to feel something is wrong out there. Anyone who has spent time in the Uintah Basin, even if they grew up along the Wasatch Front, knows the silence is different. The air is too still at night. The sky is too open. The landscape feels like it's waiting. Maybe the ranch is a supernatural hotspot. Maybe it's a scientific anomaly. Maybe it's a thin place where dimensions overlap. Or maybe it's something so old and so woven into the land that we simply don't have the language for it. But one thing is certain. Skinwalker Ranch doesn't care whether you think it's real. It only cares that people keep showing up. And when they do, something always answers.